Well, we're back for another episode, and on A Neighbor's Choice, we cover the cross section of current events and health and a total renaissance approach to looking at things. And today, our guest joins us, the Raw Egg Nationalist, Ren. How you doing, sir?
It's always a pleasure to speak to you, Dave. Always a pleasure.
It's great to have you on because over the weekend we saw the breaking news that has become the kind of new topic of the political conversation, which is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. dropping out of the race and endorsing Trump, making a kind of unity ticket. The idea being that they don't have to agree on everything, but they will agree on the things that are most important. Kennedy identifying, health and the particularly children's health as the key motivator and wanting to eliminate chronic diseases and make that his legacy. Trump seems to be in agreement with that and opposition to the Ukraine war. And that's the new kind of alliance brand that's being developed between the two. What do you think of this?
I think it's great. I think it's the best possible outcome. I mean, I think it's worth remembering, actually, when RFK Jr. first entered the race last year, I think Trump was very keenly aware of the importance and the potential appeal of the health-based focus that RFK Jr. brings. And, that's what he's known for: decades and decades of environmental campaigning, health advocacy, vaccines, processed food, all this kind of stuff, endocrine disruptors. And so when RFK Jr. announced his presidential run last year, 2023, Trump said then that he would launch a presidential commission into chronic diseases if he won in 2024. So something like this has been brewing for a long time because of RFK. I mean, Trump, whether or not the intention was always for RFK to join Trump, or whether that's a newer development or even a very new development, I don't know. But I think it's the best possible outcome, really, because it obviously makes it much more likely that actually we are going to get some sort of, well, a presidential commission of some sort, some real attempt to solve the problem of chronic disease in the US for the first time, really. I don't think any. I mean, we had Nixon's war on cancer, right? That was a big thing in the 70s, the war on cancer. There was a focus on heart disease under Eisenhower after Eisenhower had a heart attack in the White House. But there's never been anything like this, really. And I think it's to be welcomed. Absolutely. I'm excited, and I know a lot of other people are as well.
You have those videos of Kennedy talking about getting the youth healthy, President Kennedy from years ago.
Yeah.
Eisenhower's thing, unfortunately, became the catalyst for the birth of the seed oil revolution, right? And so
Yes, he did.
that was a catastrophe. Nixon's war on cancer, all that did was lead to, you know, entrenching the power of the phony, oncological paradigm of focusing
Mm.
on genetic solutions and never really taking the metabolic origin of cancer seriously, like real science seems to suggest. So both of those were ineffective branding. Well, they were effective branding campaigns for false oligarchic based medicine, which is something I know that your brand opposes, right? And so we can
Yeah.
only hope that Kennedy's influence can be real and solid in the face of all of that nasty Republican oligarchic funding that Republicans typically enjoy. And Trump probably's got a good piece of that, although not as much as a low energy Jeb or somebody. He's got a lot of money probably coming from big corn and big soy and big kill and big death and big all that. And so, there's going to be a big come to Jesus moment for him at some point. It's all nice and fun and games now, but if you actually get in the White House and you got those people like Purdue, those guys that are used to the seed oil factory chicken sludge that humans are eating in en masse, people like the Purdue's and all those guys, they have a lot of influence over Republicans. The big ag has a big influence on a lot of Republicans. It'd be interesting to see if Trump will have the backbone enough to see through a disruption of the paradigm. Because right now, if you go to America, let's say you go to China, you're going to get rice and maybe I don't know what the heck their second item will be of their staple, maybe fish or some kind of pork. But
Pork,
here,
yeah, probably pork.
the staple of America is bread and seed oil. It's grain
Mm.
and seed oil. Everywhere you go across this country, I've been doing some traveling recently for various events and doing some altitude research. But everywhere you go, you cannot escape the reach of trash grain and trash seed oil mixed together as the staple foundation of every menu, every place you go to, every hotel, everywhere. You can't escape it. And that's got to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting actually just to go back to what you were saying about whether Trump will have the courage to face up to big ag and big pharma. He certainly had the courage to face up to the military industrial complex, didn't he,
Yeah.
in his first term? I mean, he didn't declare any more wars. I mean, I can't really say that Trump was the best thing that ever happened for Raytheon and Lockheed Martin shares. So
Right.
I don't think it's beyond him to stand up to these groups, especially since this is probably going to be his last term if he gets in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, RFK Jr. obviously has the will to do that, and he's been doing it his entire career. He's been, for the last 20, 30 years, however long he's been speaking up against big pharma, big ag, big food, etc. But I do think that we shouldn't. I don't think this is just a cynical ploy from Trump. I mean, obviously, it could very well win him the election if all the people who were going to vote for RFK Jr. now vote for him, especially in the swing states. But I do actually think that there is, you can easily see a kind of presidential health commission that actually tries to kind of buck the power and break the power of big ag and big pharma. You can see how that actually fits into a true populist agenda. I mean, it might have been missing from Trump's first term, but I don't
Yeah.
think that there's any sense in which actually, taking the fight now to big pharma and big food is outside the popular. In fact, I think it's integral to a real populist agenda.
Yeah. It's interesting how there's always this kind of triangulation move that you see, like Nixon, anti-communist Nixon is the one that opens up relations with China. And now you
Mhm.
have Mr. Big Mac himself, Mr. Filet-O-Fish himself, perhaps aligning himself with a challenge to big seed oil and big processed food. This is tremendously interesting, and exciting times. I mean, I've mentioned before, but 2018 or so is when I started talking about seed oils daily and nightly. First, my program was in the evening, and we did the daily show, and I would hit that seed oil topic every single day. And back then, every time I brought it up to my broadcast audience, I had to explain to them what seed oils were, vegetable oils. It was a whole new topic back then, and it was very, very, frontier stuff. Obviously, if you went to the podcast, the nutritional dissident podcast ghetto, so to speak, the niche, you would see people talking about seed oils years before, but I was the first one to take it to a daily broadcast news media audience every day. And now, 2024, we've got the seed oil topic being named explicitly by Kennedy as the reason for this unity ticket, one of the top things he's going to go after. I think that's a tremendous progress in that short amount of time.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I think also, if you think back to the Tucker Carlson documentary that I was in, The End of Men, that was 2 years ago.
Right.
And, you know, Robert Kennedy, I was in that. Robert F. Kennedy was in it as well. We were talking about seed oils, about endocrine disruptors. And, the mainstream media's reception of that was extremely hostile.
Right. Yeah.
They were saying, "Oh, this is ridiculous. Testosterone isn't a political issue. Male fertility isn't a political issue. Exercise isn't a political issue. Why are you talking about seed oils, etc.?" And
Yeah.
now, 2 years later, this is a presidential issue. This may
Wow.
actually be a defining issue of the presidency
Yeah.
because RFK Jr. could swing the presidency, and so actually, we have to see this is a crucial issue, and
Yeah.
yeah,
This is
it's huge
essential for
progress.
this is essential for the revolt of the people. I typically am very anti-state power. I'm a
Mm,
political atheist or whatever, but I understand the importance incrementally of using it in a strategic way to defeat the oligarchs that have entrenched themselves through the state. And one of the things that I think I've called for some time, and I probably you would agree with, is that we should ban seed oils and put like a 4 year phase out period to help mom and pop restaurants and so forth adjust to healthier alternatives. You'd have catastrophic. I mean, the kind of it may take longer than that, but I'm trying to be a little bit thread the needle between bold and realistic here because if you were to ban seed oils, I mean, again, first you get to remove the subsidies. That would piss the
yes.
hell out of a lot of right wing areas like Iowa and stuff like that that depend on these seed oil sludge subsidies for their corn and soy product. I mean, Trump would really be. I mean, golly, he'd have a. That may be fascinating to see if he could actually even cut one subsidy, much less ban them. But I think that's one of the few things that you should have an outright direct ban on using the power of this lawless government, which has long usurped its constitutional boundaries. I would use that same Leviathan against itself and ban seed oils, put a 4 year incremental phase out period to get everybody to transition to healthier oils. And then at that point, you would have an opportunity to really start to heal the citizenry because these seed oils are a weapon. They're almost like a psychological operation because they retard the public. They mentally derange the public. We know that bipolar, depression, even schizophrenia, all kinds of mental illnesses, which is the heart of the Democratic, establishment, and their brand is built on mental illness. And getting people to say "Yes, Queen" as they dismember a 8-month-old baby. I mean, that's kind of a sick. I mean, you can't. That's about a psychopathic. I mean, if you went into a mental institute and you saw women, gleefully clapping their hands, saying yes, queen," over and over again as an 8-month-old baby is dismembered, you say these are psychopathic, demon-possessed people. Please get them out of here. But they've made that mainstream, right? So we know that mental illness is driving a lot of their power. And seed oils are one of the main drivers of mental illness and obesity, fatigue. Even on the Republican side, they're even worse off because they've been eating them longer, typically to an older audience.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I don't disagree at all. I think that yeah, these low quality ingredients, particularly seed and vegetable oils, the massive amounts of corn that are stuffed into everything, high fructose corn syrup, all these kinds of low quality ingredients that are supported by this absolutely insane subsidy regime. Uh, we need to do something drastic about them. Absolutely drastic. I think the problem has obviously reached a scale and has taken on a nature where it's that bad that actually yes you might need to ban seed oils. You certainly ought to try and do something about the subsidies that sort of underlie this whole insane system. I mean, one very interesting book, actually, very radical book, quietly radical book, is The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan, which focuses on the why Americans eat so much corn, basically, and he goes into detail about the subsidy system that incentivizes massive overproduction of corn. Its origins in the after the end of the First World War, when the European market for American corn suddenly dropped out, the bottom of it dropped out, because France and the other European nations started producing their own grains again. And it's become this monstrous thing that has driven, in particular, the creation of processed foods and the kind of the way that they've morphed. I mean, they've just become worse and worse and worse over decades and decades as they've been stuffed with more and more additives, with more and more corn, with more and more seed oils, subsidized soy, etc. Um, so, I mean, we are talking about a system. We're not just talking about there's an underlying logic, I think, to all of this, to what's
Right.
going on, to why the American food system is so bad, and fundamentally, I think it does have to do with these cheap, a couple of cheap commodities, cheap corn, cheap soy. That's what we need to. That's the problem that we need to solve. We need to change the incentives that drive this system, this insane system of overproduction, and we need to steer it back towards the production of healthier commodities that benefit not only the people who consume them, but actually the communities that produce them as well. Because let's be honest about it, the overproduction of corn and soy in the Midwest has destroyed the Midwest. It's destroyed
Yeah.
the environment. It's destroyed the environment. It's destroyed the communities because you've seen the small farmer has disappeared. Now we just
Yeah.
have, these enormous farms that are producing vast quantities of corn and soy for corporate producers, barely making any money at all, barely hanging on, pouring vast quantities of hideous agrochemicals over their crops using GMO as well. I mean, all of this needs to change. And I do hope, I mean, I really do hope that this presidential commission has the teeth and the ambition to grapple with the real nature of the problem rather than just sort of dealing with it in a kind of superficial way. I mean, I think they really need to get to the bottom of it. But RFK Jr. is someone I think who knows. He
Yeah.
understands this. I mean, I'm sure that we could talk to him about all of this stuff and it wouldn't be news to him. He would know
Right.
about it. He would understand. And so that does give me hope.
I've seen him having evidence. I've seen evidence that he has perhaps a knowledge that even the importance of CO2 production in human health, that's a pretty radical
Mm,
rabbit trail to go down. And I've seen some evidence that privately that he's aware of that issue. But um, I want to go back to, I know that you're a big advocate against factory farming.
mm,
And you recently posted a video of a cow frolicking, happy to be away from that situation. And it's some kind of look like some kind of a retreat or something for animals or a protection reserve. What do you
mm.
think? What do you think about like how would we transition? And would you be okay with, like, I was thinking about butter production and tallow? If you were to try to scale that quickly, if you were going to transition away from vegetable oil, um, how would you feel about which one is the lesser of two evils, or how would you thread that needle? Because I know that's a passion of yours, animal welfare, and I do support regenerative agriculture. But of course, we're not going to be able to scale up the knowledge or anything logistics of going to a Joel Salad in America, who is the regenerative agriculture farmer that's an icon of regenerative grazing and holistic treatment of the animals and everything. You're not going to be able to do that overnight if you had, say, a 4-year phase out of these catastrophic poisons. So you're going to have to rely on some of the conventional methods of dairy production. And, if they're going to start using tallow more, then, it's going to be coming from more conventional cattle production. How would you feel about that?
I mean, I'm a realist, and I not, I mean, I would be, I for, I can see it. I can see the plan in the long term, and I can see that yes, I mean, you would need to do things gradually. You would need to phase out products like seed and vegetable oils. You would need to transition gently in a way that is fair on farmers in particular, because farmers have a really hard time. They have a really hard time. It's difficult for farmers, and they need all the help they can get. So, you wouldn't want the requirements to be too onerous. You wouldn't want to require farmers to change too quickly, but you would want them to change, and you would want, in a longer time period, for there to be a fundamental change and maybe a total move away from the production of soy and corn for the manufacture of seed and vegetable oils and all these other things. But yeah, I mean, I think that yes, you would probably have to rely on less than optimal methods for some time, definitely. But there are ways that you could make them better, I think, even without too much trouble. I mean, you could. I mean, feedlots function on cheap grain, and that's just a fact of life. You know, you couldn't have these concentrated animal feeding operations, as they're called, CAFOs, without cheap corn and soy and other cheap commodities that are, you know, produced in these great quantities because of subsidies. So, you know, whether you could run the feedlots in a different way, I don't know. Whether you could transition to hay or to other to other foods that are kinder on cows, because cows have a hard time when they're being stuffed full of grain. I don't know. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, the logistics of it. That's a difficult question. I don't doubt that in the longer term that you could do it. But yes, I mean, in the immediate near future, I don't think that we're going to transition to the Joel Salatin ideal within 1 year or 2 years or maybe 4 years or maybe longer. I think it would depend. I think it would depend on the willingness of government actually to help farmers rather than you know, just throwing money at them in the form of subsidies. I think that there would need to be intelligent support from government for America's farmers that encouraged them to do the right thing. Uh, but yes, I mean, that would all need to be hammered out. I mean, it's you know, I mean, and hopefully someone like RFK Jr. will employ people maybe like Joel Salatin to advise on exactly you know, what a transition away from industrial agriculture as it's practiced now in the US towards a more regenerative model would look like and how it would be done.
Yeah. Well, I know another logistical hurdle would be, you know, getting the Republican leadership like Mitch McConnell in the Senate to, to even greenlight the approval of, let's
Mm,
say, if Kennedy wanted to become if Trump wanted to make him Secretary of Health and Human Services, which would put him in charge of CDC and FDA and everything else. That's monstrosity in this country. That would be a big hurdle to get the Senate to even allow that to go through. So there's some big challenges ahead, but I think certainly we can both be take heart in seeing this symbolic win for our cause of naming and condemning seed oils, right? And so this is a big win. And he talked about other stuff too, the microplastics, the endocrine disruptors. And he talked about how, in the old days, if you were obese, you would be thrown into the circus, just to explain how different the world is that we're in
yeah.
today versus what it was before. So all of those are big symbolic victories.
Yeah, yeah, big symbolic victories. I mean, it really does matter that somebody is actually talking about this on during a presidential campaign. I mean, I can't imagine this happening in 2020. This wouldn't have happened in 2020, couldn't have happened in 2016, certainly couldn't have happened in, you know, like 2008. I mean, it's quite it's an amazing transformation, really. It's an amazing transformation, and like I said, you know, even when The End of Men, the Tucker Carlson documentary, came out 2 years ago, the mainstream media response was extremely hostile and didn't really suggest that actually, you know, the kind of issues that we were talking about, that Tucker Carlson was trying to highlight with the documentary, could uh, really sort of gain a mainstream foothold. But yes, they have. And I mean, I think, you know, it can't have escaped people's notice that Americans are unhealthier than ever. But it's one thing to notice that, and then it's another thing to try and actually do something about it, to try and raise awareness about it, to ask the right questions, and to challenge the entrenched interests who have every, you know, incentive to maintain Americans in a state of dependency and ill health. So I mean, I do think that this is a turning point, actually, possibly in the history of America,
Have you been
in the
able to
modern
talk to
age.
Kennedy? Have you talked to RFK yourself?
No, no, I haven't. No, I'd like to. I've talked to people who are pretty close to him, and uh, I mean, when he was running against Trump, then I had a bit of a downer on him because I thought, well, what he's going to do is he's going to steal votes from Trump, and then Trump won't get elected, and then we'll have Biden or Kamala Harris. But I mean, now that they're together, then it's fantastic, and I'm glad. And like I said at the beginning, I think it's the best possible outcome. Really, the best outcome we could have hoped for. But yes, I mean, I would be very, I would be very interested to talk to RFK Jr. and to pick his brains and really try to find out the full extent to which he, has gone down the health rabbit hole, the extent to which he is red pilled on health. I mean, it was interesting that you said that there's a clear suggestion that he understands the importance of CO2 in metabolic health,
Yeah.
etc., which is pretty cool. Where did you hear that, David?
Well, I can't get into it yet, but we're going to try to maybe post something publicly about it in a little bit, a little evidence. So I have to check with the
Nice.
person that was my source. But yeah, the idea is that CO2 being, in a healthy body, this is something, again, tying it back into that recent piece I did at your site called
Mm.
America Needs a repeat summer. Well, it's kind of good timing that Kennedy comes out over the summer right after I write that article and put seed oil and microplastics at the heart of Trump's campaign. Very cool. So I guess I was in touch with the zeitgeist, and the spirit of Ray Pete hovered over Kennedy, I guess. But anyways, Kennedy is sounding like Ray Pete, by the way. But yeah, Ray was good at explaining how CO2 is the not a waste product, but rather the crown jewel of a healthy ATP production pathway in the metabolic process of the human. And that CO2 is kind of like day to lactic acid being night. If you have too much lactic acid built up, it's going to inhibit CO2 production, which is going to lead to diseases of aging, obesity, cancer. All of those are in the presence of a lot of lactic acid built up over time. But where there is CO2 retaining in the tissue, there is less lactic acid and more vitality, higher thyroid. The high thyroid state goes along with healthy CO2 production and retention in the tissue. And where there is healthy CO2 retention, you have better use of oxygen in all the different organs of the body. And then you also have better, vacillation. I mean, you can see examples of people putting their women with viscous cellulitis, which we know, cellulite, which comes from the seed oils and other plastic type products. When they put CO2 exposure to their thighs and buttocks, it just smooths out, it just goes away. The cellulite disappears. I mean, you almost want to make a Billy Mays infomercial, about CO2. It'll make your skin smooth as baby. But anyways, I mean, that's just one of those things that's going to have to be understood properly and properly researched once people get their head out of their tails of their seed oil stupor that they're in. But I know we got to wrap up here, but in closing, have you seen, because Kennedy pushing the seed oil thing in particular by name in his announcement to align with Trump, have you seen an uptick personally in people reaching out or, encountering your content? And number two, do you tell us about any of their projects or articles that you'd like to highlight on your outlets that you're working with?
I get the general impression just that people, say from looking at my Twitter feed in particular, and also conversations that I've been having in private, that people feel very, very energized by this.
Yeah.
It's electrified the presidential campaign actually. And I mean, I've been writing a series of articles. So I write for InfoWars now. I'm a reporter for InfoWars, and I write opinion pieces and analysis for InfoWars at the weekends. And I decided to write a two-part RFK Jr. special to coincide with his endorsement of Trump, focusing on ultra processed foods and endocrine disruptors, which he identified on Friday during his announcement speech. He identified ultra processed foods and endocrine disruptors as two of the most important causes of America's health crisis today. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be a good thing to explain in comprehensible terms to the viewership, the readership, exactly what ultra processed food is and why it's bad, and do the same for endocrine disruptors. So that's what I've been doing over the weekend. And you can go to the Infowars site and read my primer on ultra processed food, which is up there now in the opinion section, and I'm just about to finish the second part on endocrine disruptors, which will be posted there later. But yeah, I just get the general impression, I get the feeling that people are just really excited about this. It's really not just the fact that RFK Jr. is endorsing Trump and that might help Trump win, but also in particular this health stuff. I mean, certainly the people, in my sphere, the kind of right-wing bodybuilder sort of sphere, the esoteric Twitter health sphere, then yeah, I mean, there's a real suddenly sort of renewed sense of optimism. It really does seem like all the posting that we do on Twitter and all the articles we write, or some of us write, are actually starting to pay off now, and it's although of course it's hard to quantify our specific influence on any of this and our influence on the broader discourse. Nevertheless, it does feel like actually we've been pushing in the right direction now for 4 years, maybe longer, and it's really starting to looks like it's starting to bear fruit, and that's a good feeling, and that's what we want, because I mean, I don't think I'd be the only one to say that actually, apart from the assassination attempt, then this election campaign has lacked energy. I mean, part of that really has been that from the Democrat side, Kamala Harris in particular, like there's no real energy coming from the Democrat side. And what they're actually trying to do, I think, is they're trying to slow things down. They're trying to prevent Trump from having contact with Kamala Harris. They don't want the debates to happen. They don't want Kamala Harris to reveal her policies. They just kind of want to smother Trump. And that's what they've done. I mean, there was that incredible moment in Butler when Trump evaded the assassin's bullets by millimeters. And then you had that sort of iconic fist pump gesture and the photographs, etc. That's been forgotten. That's almost that, because quite literally been forgotten. It's been suppressed, and that kind of really threatened.
Yeah. And that's an impaired thyroid state in mass working its function. See,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Because
if interesting way.
Yeah, it's like we have this learned helplessness, like totally dependent on input for stimulus, and it's an effect of having an impaired thyroid and high serotonin, high lactic acid, high other stress hormones, adrenaline, and all these things that are totally makes you the plaything of psychopathic oligarchs. And when you get your thyroid in function, if you get your energy going, and you embrace dopamine more than serotonin, you embrace all these healthy states, CO2 instead of lactic acid, you start to be able to think clearly, spontaneous, and you don't put up with bullshit. You don't. You're not angry. You're ready to defend and take care of that which you love. When you're in a state of impaired thyroid, you're foggy headed, you're low energy, you don't sleep well, you're angry, you're prickly, you react to people's slights as if it's killing you, and then you wait for tyrants to tell you what to think and tell you how to feel. And that goes for both those who are in favor of the tyrants and those who think they're in opposition to the tyrants. They share the same disposition the tyrant wants them to have, which is fear. And it's a complex of fear mixed with complacency, mixed with dependency, and mixed with a kind of a disembodied reaction that makes the person not trust their conscience and not be able to feel their conscience and react accordingly. That's what Ray Peat was all about. Think, perceive, act. We don't have thinking, we don't have perception, and we don't have action going on in this country because we've been poisoned for decades. And that poisoning has its own feedback loop mechanism that kind of resupplies the regime's power by surrendering more and more of our energy to this parasitical complex that we have manifested. And we're even estrogen, all the worst aspects of female stereotypes are amplified by estrogenic poisonings that women and men both have. Excess estrogen. Progesterone is the hormone of female uh, optimal health. Having higher progesterone in relation to estrogen is the key, and you can't get that way if you keep eating seed oils and corn nuggets. So I really appreciate your time, sir. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, Dave. And yeah, exciting times, exciting times.
I can't wait to hear Alex Jones talk to you about seed oils and talk to you about CO2 and everything else like that. It'll be fun.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll have to. I'll have to make sure that happens.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
You too.
That's it, folks. If you want to follow Raw Egg Nationalist work, go to Infowars.com. Check out his magazine, Man's World. And also, if you want to contact me, you can at hello@aneighborschoice.com. I'm David Gornoski. Godspeed.